So first off, thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody else. Terence, for the Friday hug. I was like, that was going to be mine, and you just stole it righteously. But well done. You actually had extra crew to help. It would have been better than my iPhone. No, I think it's okay. There's plenty. So let me just, thanks, Mark, for the opportunity again. I skipped last year. It's great to be back. So if you want to end up last at Rubyfuza, actually explicitly mention another language in your title. That ends you up where I am now. So, but it's more about Ruby than it is about JS. And you guys will see what I'll say. And it's not about Node at all. Like, I couldn't care less. This is not about Node. This is about something else. So, who am I? I'm Kenneth. I am the Chief Rocket Scientist. That's my title. I thought it quite ironic this morning when I met the real rocket scientist sitting at the table. But this is what my business card says, and I stick to it. I'm on Twitter, Kenneth Kalmer. I'm on GitHub, Kenneth Kalmer. Open source is my blog. I'm on Instagram. Every picture in the background is my own. So if you see no attribution, it's there. It's all mine, including those inlines. They're mine. I've got all the bruises to prove it. Valuationup.com is who I work for. And that's where the rocket logo comes in. Anybody that understands financials is you always want your charts to go up and right as quickly as possible. That's our rocket. We help entrepreneurs make real sense of their management accounts. Business owners, they do something very well if they made it through their first year. They put on tires on cars, or they sell coffee, or they run a franchise, but they don't understand finance. So you get this ironic situation where most businesses fail in the year of their best sales, especially a couple of months after the most sales happen. They destroy their cash. And we're trying to mitigate that by building a set of tools. We take complex financial models and we reduce it down to colors and lines and explain to people what this number is, where we got it, why it's red, and get it to green. So it's essentially we offer them an opportunity to refactor their financials, if I have to say it in our parlance. And valuation of the business is the ultimate metric. That's the one where you see the long-term effects of every small step you take. So for us, the challenge is we need a responsive UI, literally to the point where as you're busy changing your management account, the interface starts coming alive with more and more available information. It will update on the spot and give you results to, depending on what your view is. I'll show you an example. It's not something we want to do on the server. A lot of these calculations are so simple that it gets done quicker by the browser than just the latency of connecting to a server to do that same calculation. That, and obviously it makes your app so much easier to scale if everybody's browsers are doing the work and you're just serving skeleton markup and JSON. This is a portion of the dashboard. Guys, I need to check out everything intrinsically, but there's a short term, a medium term, a long term. That's the outlook. That's always there. They can browse some stuff. There's a snippet of management accounts, some key liquidity, profitability, and activity ratios. They can drill into each one of those, nice lines drawn off the statements to show them where they are. There's a whole lot of stuff they can do. Of these numbers, only one, the risk score, far right, is not calculated in the browser. Otherwise, there's 20 numbers here that they can have an idea for. And like I said, all of them are updating in real time as they tab through this form, filling in their numbers. So, like, great, we did it. There's 50 plus different little financial models. Some of them compose up from smaller parts into bigger parts and get reused and whatnot. And it's got all the buzzwords. It's Backbone, it's CSS3, it's async, it's pub sub, or event emitters or mediators, whatever you want to call it. But it's in there. Then shit happens. Like, this is fantastic. Let's give them a PDF with exactly everything in there, like all the same information. And then you're like, we did it. That's that same 15 ratios, and that's a preview window. That's not a browser anymore. So, and this is kind of what I want to start sharing with you guys from here, is we managed to get it right, but how did we do it? So you're kind of faced with a dilemma. Do you duplicate every single function, or every little model class that you've got, or do you figure out reuse, or do you use what the fuck to PDF? Like, I've had like interesting discussions with Brendan last night. Like they seem to watch some good uses for it, but I hate it. It creates the worst looking PDFs, especially if you just hammer text in it. There's some cool tricks for graphics, but I will not share. It's not my place to do so. So I tried that first, spent days figuring out how to work that in nicely and how do you do TOC and consistent headers and footers, and then custom sweat and deleted the branch and decided to go with Prawn. So reuse. Single responsibility. And I really brought this down to this, and the code will show it as well, but that financial model needs to live in one place. And that little class or object, that's all it does. We can then leverage stuff like DI or inversion of control to help mix and match these different classes and actually cross language. And that's where the stuff gets really interesting. And then the mission is to use as much of that JavaScript, well-tested JavaScript on the server. And again, not with Node. This needs to happen in our domain. So we do it by using the Ruby Racer. You can use the Ruby Rhino. If you're on JRuby, the API is identical. It's from the same author. The Ruby Rhino is just very slow, apparently. But there's a V8 port to Java, and they're trying to figure out how to get that into the Ruby Racer itself. And I guess that would mean the end of the Ruby Rhino. And we'll carry on using the same CoffeeScript. So everybody loves CoffeeScript by now, I hope. But we just want to be able to do that and just carry on using our code. So gem file entries, bundle install, and that's back. This is one of the formulas. It will not launch a rocket at all. It won't happen. It's a key thing for understanding how businesses work. It's one I could extract out of the app quite nicely as public knowledge. It's the weighted average cost of capital, and this is for a private firm. So you essentially have the cost of your equity and the cost of your debt and tax. Bring these together and you get to a number, and that number you can use to critically reduce the valuation so that it matches real life. Anybody in finance understand this stuff? If you've got a public company, there's a whole extra cost component that comes in. But I'm not teaching finance. Simple little piece of CoffeeScript. Take a financial statement, suck a few variables out, and you've got your cost of equity, the cost of debt, and your tax rate. And bang, you get a number. And so it goes for very many more of these financial models. Tiny, well-tested, easy to work. They accept the statement object, maybe one or two other things, and that's the end of it. Then we need to present it. Now this is part of separating things and allowing the dependency injection to work. I'm not introducing a view just yet. I called them layouts because I had no better name at the time, and I still don't have a better name for them. But they'll essentially take data, massage it one way or another, and they'll take a view. And this is a very simple example. It will just render out whatever view has been injected into the initializer, passing the data through. But in other examples, it might need to bootstrap a view first with initializing the view with some data. It will call render several times, feeding it different stuff. It will have like a wrap up, cool, I'm done, this is the stuff. And then that view, if you take a simple backbone view, it can be as simple as just like adding it to the DOM. The value is displayed somewhere nicely, and it works. So little example, like initializing the view individually, passing it in with whatever data to the layout, telling the layout to do its work. Is everybody with me still at this stage? So that's not really anything special. Okay, all right. Now we need to start reusing this on the server. One of the trickiest things, and this was trial and error more than anything else, was to set up a JavaScript context. In the browser, we take this for granted. It's just there. JavaScript just runs, and we need to do it ourselves. So I've got commented out lines for Rhino, if you want to test this on JRuby, but load V8, set up a JavaScript context, make it accessible from the outside, delegate some few methods into that JavaScript context just so our little object is easier to work with, initialize it. I'm not going to show you the code for this. It will be in it's on the GitHub repo when I push this code. And give it the ability to load some CoffeeScript in straight out of our assets directly. Like nice and simple. Compile the CoffeeScript on the fly by reading it like that. So this has got no caching. Every time it executes, it will read that file off disk. Like it needs some work. I would ideally like to figure out how to use the asset pipeline here, but that's not important for this. So we have V8 now at our fingertips. We've got a nice little Ruby object, just giving it a bit more that we need, and we can pass it around and let it do work. We can load our CoffeeScript straight out of asset, so it doesn't affect our normal work. Same CoffeeScript file goes to the normal asset compilation for the browser. We cherry pick what we need on the server side. Some additional plumbing, fake console, fake window objects, because it's inevitable you'll have a console.log and it will bomb out on the server. There's no console. Some libraries you might load into there and they expect a window object. So the window object just basically links straight back to the context and done. And this is far from a DOM. I haven't tried running jQuery in there. I think it will break. Like, I've got no hopes that it would actually work. This is just supposed to run tiny little functions. So then we've got a wrapper. Sorry, I showed you the layout first, the JavaScript layout, that would take the view and render it, or the view and the data and render it. So that layout just needs a thin little Ruby wrapper. All it does is it accepts a JavaScript context, and I do that DI style just to speed up the tests. Load dependencies, which will load some more files. The WAC file is the first little computation I showed you guys, just that financial model, and it loads that same layout that it's busy wrapping, like vanilla JavaScript, not CoffeeScript, but just set up that layout. The view is directly set the context. The V8 object you treat like a hash, and you can get any top-level object like that or set any top-level object. So in the JavaScript world, we're now injecting a Ruby object that's going to be that view, and it just falls through. We can call render on this object, and this is just a V8 like nuance, but it's got to go on the context, find the layout object, find the render method, and call it. So same if you use JavaScript.call or apply, and just give it itself back to maintain the correct scope. It's a bit nasty, but it's luckily one line, and it's over. And it will render. Like, it will actually do that. It takes that JavaScript object, the render just falls through, and by the time the layout calls, let's go back. By the time the layout calls render, that render comes back into Ruby world. And it gets that options hash becomes immediately accessible, that it can do stuff with it. That allows us to make a Ruby view. And that wraps a Prawn document or a Prawn page. You can pass a PDF in again from outside and stack up and build. And you can do with it whatever you want. Just layer the text on it. And it's the same as setting up a view, setting up a layout, and calling render on it. And the magic just happens. The 1,000-foot view, again, there's one JavaScript model that's got the business logic in it. That's the important part. There's a JavaScript layout, still looking for a better word, that knows how to take in some data, or model, or accompanying data. It will do stuff with it, and it will delegate that to a view. In Ruby land, we need a wrapper around that layout so that we can do exactly the same thing, but we can pass a Ruby view in. On the JavaScript side, we just drop in a Backbone view, or however which way you want to do your stuff. And yeah, that self-calling business just works fine. Sorry. And just to double back, this is again why we did it. So same 15 models and numbers, same 15 models and numbers. Even the layout manager that draws this entire block is responsible for drawing it inside the PDF. The one just appends values and adds some classes based on metrics. The other one does different kind of tests and changes font colors and draws neat little rounded blocks in a PDF. All vector-based output that just looks absolutely beautiful. Sure, I flew through that. Yeah, so this is how I felt when I got it right. And I went on a hunch doing one of these things, and it paid off amazingly well. Mark mentioned last night outside, he was saying the problem with PDFs is you're duplicating everything. And I said I'll show him how you end up duplicating almost nothing. And this was a big fear for me. And we just got it done. So I've got some code up, well, almost up. I'll commit it on the plane. I'm leaving right after this. Unfortunately, I'm not joining you for dinner. You guys can go check. I've just got 1 or 2 bugs to work out. But it works, and you can play with it. It will have a form asking you for some numbers. You can punch in anything, and then you'll get your PDF or you'll get your browser presentation. It's both there. Hopefully, this can open up some doors for some kind of black magic if you need to do this stuff. It's initially a lot of plumbing, getting it all together, just the layouts, the JavaScript context, everything you need. But once it's in place, it's amazing to see how you can produce, which version is that? Ooh, can't even see. 34, this is a 34-page PDF that ends up being not even 200 lines of Ruby code, where it just sets up one JavaScript context and just passes it in through objects, one after the other into these layouts and setting up views itself actually as a view and renders itself out on a document. It really works fantastically well. So with that, I'll say thank you for listening. And it's been a long day. Yeah, any questions? I think I've got 5 minutes. No, it was to try and preserve it at all. And then moving it to the back end, at very best I introduce 100 millisecond delay between tabbing out of a form and some interface component updating, and even worse if it's cascading updates. Because a lot of these values, you'll see different cells on the page, and they would, like, there's literally composition going on. This ratio is dependent on the values of these, of these, of these. It would become seconds between updates, and we would unnecessarily bother the server. Like, we were from the word go, we're a browser-based app. We want people to play. So yeah, it was absolutely necessary to figure out how to do it. And if I didn't hear of the Ruby Racer by chance before then, I wouldn't even have remotely tried it. But that ended up working quite well. It took me about 2 days to get the whole thing plumbed in. And I've never looked back. Okay, we could back there.
It's not so much a question as more a statement and an answer to that question. I've seen an deployment of JavaScript like this where the team also started in the browser and then actually moved it over to iOS and ran it through WebView in iOS and then kept the same domain name. If we can transfer that now to the server and then to Windows and to any platform that has any sort of JavaScript engine, you really gave a cross-platform domain on which to test with JavaScript and just transport it to there. So I thought it was quite amazing to see that you could run your domain on iOS and now you can run it on a server as well.
Thanks.
So when you were rendering on the PDF and server side, you're passing the view. I mean, I saw in the method that you see view when you're passing it. Is that HTML or do you have the client-side printer?
That's a server-side view. So it's a PDF class that interacts with Prawn, and on the client side, it's a Backbone view with a moustache template. Okay. Or actually a handlebars template.
Handlebars.
Yeah, I'm using compiled handlebars.
Because handlebars must be rendered on the server side.
You need a DOM for it to really work nicely. And then it's just going to compile to HTML, then I have to mangle that up again to do something with it, yeah. No, on the server side, I need proper constructs for setting up a Prawn PDF document and building it up from scratch. Now, it gives you the best looking PDFs if you're just in there manipulating it directly and not trying to wangle HTML in there through some intermediate step or something. And Prawn's got some limited inline formatting that looks like HTML tags, but I'm not going to use a strong tag in the browser and a B tag on the server. That just sucks. No. I hope I answered more or less.
Yeah.
Okay. Aslan? No, the biggest thing is when the objects expect, or when some library that you might load in there expects a window object. That was a horrible one. If you get a bug, and this is important, like it's got to test that stuff with Jasmine, really make sure it works. If you get an error inside that JavaScript context on the server side, it's very difficult to trace it. Like debugging it is a nightmare. So it forces you to handle your JavaScript in that like almost the smallest, best tested units you possibly can to eliminate all that stuff. If you use libraries in there, it's easy to pick the ones that support Node or some exports or AMD style loading because they implicitly isolate themselves, and that makes it great to just chuck it in that context. But no real nuances. It was, I would say the worst was figuring out that I needed to actually pass the context into the method I'm calling the JavaScript method. It just loses its context completely. Actually, I think it gains the context of the Ruby side doing the calling. So it loses the JavaScript context. So that took a little bit of trial and error. I should have actually left the other, I had commented out lines there from our original code, which kind of showed the try this doesn't work, try this doesn't work. Ah, this one works. It's also a side effect of we started building this system with a rough idea of where we're going. So I was forced to really isolate everything as much as possible. I've had stuff where I'll start a feature in the morning, deploy it by lunch, and have it reverted and deployed again in the afternoon. Like, it just sucked. So it was like I was forced to really isolate things, and it's been fantastic. It just, that's what I said, those principles. Everybody's been hammering in the principles into our heads. It's a real benefit if you just stick to them as best you can. I'm also guilty of having a lot of old habits that I still need to get rid of. There's still some coupling, especially on the Ruby side of the app. The JavaScript side, it's isolated, like clear cut. I can just swap out things the way I need it. And it's also been a great way to learn all this because you're not bringing your Ruby baggage and bad habits to this. Everything's new. And it's a great place to test it. It's actually, just in general, if you guys want to test patterns, test it in a different language than the one you use every day. Because it really gives you a time to explore it. That's been my experience the last couple of months. Yeah. Yeah, it's worked really well. It's worked really well. Yeah, and then like the Backbone event emitter, that depends on jQuery. So they are basically just overwrite it blatantly with whatever gets when the event triggers, it just calls the callback immediately. As far as possible, I've tried to actually no-op them so that my code would kind of handle if there's no events. Because when you generate a PDF, no data changes. It's got the perfect state up front. But somewhere in the path, there's something that calls a bind, and you just no-op. Like, there we go. Oh, and then another nuance is set timeout. Some libraries expect set timeout to work. So I had to implement a stub set timeout that basically when it gets called, it just fires immediately. And it works. Yeah, that's about the only, that one tripped me up for a while. But I got it in place. Ivan?
I'm a bit slow on that Prawn. The JavaScript wasn't for any kind of modeling, right? It was
just modeling.
You add your business logic into the JavaScript, so that's what you gain.
Yeah.
Because I'm missing the only Prawn view.
Yeah, I tried to not even like, bang, that's it. Yeah, I'll flesh this out into something that actually looks a bit more. So this allows them like check how Prawn works and see what it's like to run the same project on JRuby and Ruby without like doing anything apart from bundle install. Yeah, some good stuff. I've got a previous presentation that wasn't nearly as worked out as this. That's also on my GitHub. That one showed the same kind of setup, but with sprockets directly in Sinatra and a bunch of other bullshit that actually detracted quite seriously from the presentation. But yeah. So yeah, this stuff is possible in a 32-page document. I think our master branch is like over 40 pages now, and we're still fleshing it out with more stuff. It helps. It really helps to change something in one place, really change it in one place, and it just bubbles everywhere. Cool. Last question? Any? Cool. Thanks a lot. That's it.